I'm Martha Reynolds, 58 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing here with packed bags, ready to walk away from the 3 grandchildren I've essentially raised single-handedly. Emma, Jacob, and little Lily stare at me with confusion in their innocent eyes while my son Richard begs me to reconsider. But after Bethany's 4th pregnancy announcement at dinner tonight, something inside me finally broke. After years of sacrifice, endless nights, and emptied retirement accounts, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. This time, I was choosing myself. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button if you've ever had to make a difficult choice for your own well-being, and subscribe to join our community of strong women who faced impossible situations. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. 12 years ago, I became a widow when my beloved husband Paul suffered a massive heart attack. At 46, I found myself alone, with only our son Richard, then 23, as family. I continued my career as an elementary school teacher, finding solace in the classroom until my retirement at 55. I had simple dreams for my golden years: traveling, gardening, perhaps some volunteer work. Never did I imagine I'd be raising babies again in my 50s. Richard had always been a good boy, studious, responsible, perhaps a bit eager to please. He graduated from law school with honors and secured a position at a prestigious firm in Denver. I was so proud. Then he met Bethany Williams during his first year as an associate. She was beautiful, charming, and working as a receptionist at a luxury spa. Their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage just 8 months after they met, despite my gentle suggestions to perhaps take more time. "Mom, when you know," Richard had said, his eyes shining with that particular blindness that comes with infatuation. From the beginning, I noticed worrying signs about Bethany. She seemed primarily interested in the status that came with being a lawyer's wife rather than building a genuine partnership. At their wedding, I overheard her telling a bridesmaid how she wouldn't have to work much longer once Richard made partner. While Richard worked 60-hour weeks to afford their lifestyle, Bethany spent lavishly on designer clothes and extravagant girls' trips. Still, I kept my concerns to myself. Richard was an adult, and I respected his choices. When they announced Bethany's first pregnancy, barely a year into their marriage, I was genuinely excited to become a grandmother. The pregnancy transformed Bethany, temporarily. She embraced motherhood with unexpected enthusiasm, decorating the nursery, attending every prenatal class, and posting constant baby bump updates on social media. I dared to hope my concerns had been unfounded. Emma Grace Reynolds was born on a snowy December morning in 2013. She was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and Paul's dimpled smile. The first time I held her, my heart expanded in ways I hadn't experienced since Richard was born. As I gazed into her face, I silently promised to be the best grandmother I could be. Weekend visits, special holidays, occasional babysitting. Little did I know I would become so much more. Bethany's maternal enthusiasm evaporated around Emma's 3-month mark. The sleepless nights, constant demands, and physical changes seemed to come as a shock to her. "Mommy needs me time" became her mantra as she began leaving Emma with me for increasingly longer stretches. Just for a couple hours while I get my nails done, turned into entire weekends while she went on girls' trips to Las Vegas. Meanwhile, Richard was working harder than ever at the firm, trying to make enough money to maintain their mortgage on the McMansion Bethany had insisted upon, her luxury car payments, and her shopping habits. I found myself driving the 40 minutes to their house several times a week to help with Emma. I didn't mind. I loved my granddaughter fiercely, and truthfully, I was concerned about her care when I wasn't there. Bethany seemed perpetually distracted around the baby, often scrolling through social media while Emma cried in her bouncer. When I gently suggested that perhaps she might want to join a mommy group or try some bonding activities, Bethany snapped. "Not everyone is born a perfect mother, Martha. Some of us need breaks. I'm not some robot who can just shut off my needs because there's a baby." Richard defended her every time I expressed concern. "She's adjusting, Mom. Parenthood is hard. You remember how it was." The truth was, while parenting certainly had its challenges, I had never viewed my son as an inconvenience to be endured. The situation came to a head when Emma was 8 months old. I had gone to visit my sister Barbara in Arizona for a long weekend. My first trip since Emma was born. When I returned and called to see if I could visit my granddaughter, Richard sounded strange. Actually, Mom, could you come over right now? We could use some help. I arrived to find Emma wailing, a rash covering her bottom, wearing the same clothes she'd been in when I left 3 days earlier. The house was a disaster, with dirty bottles and dishes everywhere. And Richard looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Where's Bethany?" I asked, already taking Emma into my arms and soothing her. Richard ran his hands through his unwashed hair. "She went on a spa retreat with her friends. She said she needed it after watching Emma alone while you were gone." "Alone? You were here, weren't you?" His eyes couldn't meet mine. I had a big case. I was at the office most of the weekend. "So who was watching Emma?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Bethany hired Mackenzie from down the street to babysit. Mackenzie was 14 years old. "For how long?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "Just overnight, twice." Richard looked ashamed, at least. "Mom, I know it sounds bad, but Bethany was really at her breaking point. She needed the break. That night, after bathing Emma, treating her rash, and rocking her to sleep in clean clothes, I had the first of many confrontations with my son. It ended with him begging me to move in with them, just temporarily, to help stabilize their family situation. "Please, Mom, I know it's a lot to ask, but I can't do this alone. And Bethany, she's trying, but she needs support. It would just be for a little while, until we find our footing." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I rented out my house, packed up my essentials, and moved into their guest room the following week. What I thought would be a temporary arrangement became the next chapter of my life. I settled into a routine caring for Emma, who blossomed under consistent attention. By the time she turned 2, she was a curious, talkative toddler who loved story time and playing in the garden I had planted in the backyard. Bethany's involvement with her daughter remained superficial. She was the fun mom who occasionally swept in with new toys before disappearing to work on her lifestyle blog, which, as far as I could tell, consisted primarily of posting carefully staged photos of herself in expensive outfits. Richard was rarely home before Emma's bedtime, though he tried to make up for his absence on weekends. I worried about the strain on their marriage, but kept my focus on providing Emma with stability and love. Then came the announcement that blindsided me. "We're having another baby," Bethany declared over dinner one evening, showing off another positive pregnancy test. "Emma's going to be a big sister." Richard beamed with pride while I struggled to maintain a supportive expression. How could they be considering another child when Bethany barely participated in raising the one they already had? "That's wonderful news," I managed, though inside, alarm bells were ringing. I was already doing the vast majority of childcare for Emma while technically being retired. How would I manage with a newborn, too? The second pregnancy transformed Bethany even less than the first. She used it as an excuse to completely check out of parenting Emma, claiming that the doctor said to avoid stress and pregnancy is so exhausting. Meanwhile, I became not just the primary, but essentially the only caregiver for my granddaughter. Jacob Paul Reynolds arrived in the summer of 2016. He was a beautiful, colicky baby who required constant attention. Unlike with Emma, Bethany showed almost no interest in him after the initial social media announcements and welcome home photo shoot. She didn't even pretend to try breastfeeding this time, immediately opting for formula so Grandma can help with feedings, while I rocked a screaming Jacob through sleepless nights and entertained an increasingly confused Emma during the days. Bethany's absences grew longer and more frequent. She joined a country club, started Botox treatments, and spent hours at the gym. Richard, now on partner track, worked even longer hours to support their lifestyle. Our household fell into an unspoken arrangement. I raised the children, Richard funded our lives, and Bethany. Well, Bethany lived her best life, unburdened by the responsibilities of the family she had created. One Tuesday afternoon, when Jacob was about 6 months old, I took both children to the park. Emma was happily playing in the sandbox while I pushed Jacob in the swing when I spotted a familiar figure across the playground. Bethany was there, in full makeup and workout attire, laughing with a muscular man I'd never seen before. Their body language was unmistakable. This was no casual friendship. My heart sank as I watched them. They didn't notice us, too wrapped up in their flirtation. When he leaned in to kiss her, and she enthusiastically responded, I quickly gathered the children and left before Emma could spot her mother. That night, after both kids were asleep, I sat in my room debating what to do with this information. Should I tell Richard? Would it destroy their marriage? And if it did, what would happen to Emma and Jacob? Would Bethany fight for custody out of spite? Would the children be shuttled between homes where one parent was always absent and the other overworked? Or worse, would they be left with nannies or in daycare while both parents rebuilt their separate lives? I decided to confront Bethany first. The next morning, after Richard left for work, I asked her to sit down for a talk. I saw you at Westside Park yesterday, I said simply. Her expression shifted from confusion to recognition to defiance in seconds. So you were kissing a man who isn't your husband while I was caring for your children across the playground. Bethany's eyes narrowed. Are you going to tell Richard? I think you should tell him, I responded. This family deserves honesty. She laughed, a cold sound without humor. This family is a joke, Martha. Richard works constantly, you play mother hen, and I'm suffocating in a life I never really wanted. Jason makes me feel alive. Then perhaps you should have realized that before bringing two innocent children into this joke of a family, I replied, my voice shaking. Bethany leaned forward, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my face. Listen carefully. If you tell Richard about Jason, I will take the children and make sure you never see them again. I may not be Mother of the Year, but legally, they're mine. Richard would get partial custody at best, and you'd have no rights whatsoever. Is that what you want? The threat hit me like a physical blow. She was right. I had no legal standing with my grandchildren. If she decided to punish me by keeping them away, there would be little I could do. So we're at an impasse, I said quietly. She smiled, knowing she'd won. Not really. You keep quiet and continue your grandmother routine, and I'll make sure you get to keep playing house with Emma and Jacob. Everyone wins. As she sashayed out of the room to get ready for another day of me time, I realized I had made a devil's bargain. To protect my relationship with my grandchildren, I would have to become complicit in Bethany's deception. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with innocent eyes and asked, Gamma, does Mommy love us? The question broke my heart, but I forced a smile and lied. Of course she does, sweetheart. In her own way, it was the first of many lies I would tell to protect these children from the harsh reality of their mother's indifference. 2 years passed in our dysfunctional arrangement. Emma was now 5, a bright kindergartner who loved drawing and telling elaborate stories. Jacob had grown into an energetic 2-year-old with a mischievous smile and his grandfather's warm brown eyes. Both children called me Gamma, running to me with their hurts, joys, and questions. Meanwhile, they regarded their mother with the polite caution one might show to an infrequent visitor. Richard had been made junior partner at his firm, an achievement that came with even longer hours and more travel. When he was home, he was a doting father, but these moments were increasingly rare. He seemed to have accepted the narrative that Bethany was an involved mother who simply needed Gamma's help rather than facing the reality that I had become the children's primary parent. As for Bethany, she had settled into a routine of appearances just frequent enough to maintain the facade of motherhood for Richard and social media. She attended parent-teacher conferences and doctor appointments when Richard could join, posed for family photos on holidays, and occasionally took the children for ice cream or shopping trips where she would document their special mommy time extensively online. Her affair with Jason, the personal trainer, continued discreetly. I maintained my silence, trapped by her threat regarding the children. I told myself I was protecting Emma and Jacob, but in truth, I was also protecting myself from the possibility of losing them. One morning in early spring, while emptying the bathroom trash, I discovered a positive pregnancy test hidden beneath tissues. My heart sank. I confronted Bethany in her bedroom, where she was trying on new clothes. I found the test, I said simply, holding it up. She barely glanced at it. Oops. Meant to bury that deeper. Is it Richard's? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Bethany laughed. Please, Richard and I haven't slept together in months. He's too tired from work, and I have standards. The casual cruelty of her dismissal of my son left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it trembled with anger. So it's Jason's. Gold star for Grandma, she said, holding a dress against herself in the mirror. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Handle it how exactly? She turned to face me, her expression calculating. Well, that depends on you, doesn't it? I could tell Richard it's his. He'd probably believe me if I said it happened during that weekend in Aspen. Then you could raise another one of my kids. We all stay in this happy little arrangement, and nobody gets hurt. I shook my head firmly. No, I won't be part of that lie. Richard deserves better, and so do Emma and Jacob. Her eyes narrowed. Or I could tell Richard everything. About Jason, about how you've known for years and helped me hide it. How do you think he'd feel about his precious mother then? Tell him, I said, surprised by my own resolve. I should have told him long ago. This has gone too far. Something in my tone must have alarmed her because her strategy shifted. Look, there's a third option. I go away for a while, handle this privately, and we never speak of it again. What exactly does handle this privately mean? I asked. Bethany rolled her eyes. I'm not getting into details with you. Just know I'll be taking an extended assignment in our California office. The company's been asking me to help set up their social media strategy for months. This was news to me. Bethany occasionally did social media consulting, but I'd never heard of a California office. Before I could question her further, she continued, I'll be gone for 3 months. Tell Richard whatever you want about why I need to go. Career opportunity, professional development, whatever. Just keep the pregnancy out of it. And the baby? Her expression hardened. There won't be a baby to worry about when I come back. The implication hung in the air between us. I felt sick, but also realized I had no right to make this decision for her. Bethany, are you sure that's what you want? Have you considered all your options? Save the pro-life speech, she snapped. This isn't up for discussion. I'm leaving next week, and that's that. True to her word, Bethany announced at dinner that night that she had been offered an amazing opportunity to help launch a company's social media presence in Los Angeles. Richard seemed surprised but supportive, while Emma asked if they could visit Disneyland while Mommy was in California. Bethany vaguely promised maybe someday before changing the subject. The next 3 months were actually peaceful. The children thrived in the consistent routine I provided, and Richard seemed less stressed without managing Bethany's expectations and demands. I almost allowed myself to hope that perhaps Bethany would decide to stay in California, giving us all a fresh start. Then came the call that shattered any such illusions. I'm coming home tomorrow, Bethany announced over the phone, and I'm bringing our new baby girl. I nearly dropped the phone. What? But I thought you were going to. Change of plans, she cut me off. Her name is Lily. She came early, 7 months. I'll explain to Richard that I didn't tell anyone because of complications and not wanting to worry the family. You'll back me up, of course. Bethany, you can't just... I can and I will, she interrupted. Unless you want me to tell Richard how you've known about Jason all along. How's that for Grandma of the Year? After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Another innocent child was about to be drawn into our web of lies and dysfunction. Another baby I would inevitably be responsible for raising. For the first time, I seriously considered walking away. I was packing a suitcase when Emma found me. Gamma, are you going somewhere? She asked, her little face scrunched with worry. No, sweetheart, I said, quickly closing the suitcase, just organizing some old clothes. Later that night, Emma woke screaming from a nightmare that Gamma disappeared like the mommy in her storybook. As I held her, soothing away her tears, Jacob toddled in, thumb in mouth, wanting comfort too. Looking at their trusting faces, I knew I couldn't leave. Not yet. These children needed one stable adult in their lives, and for better or worse, that person was me. The next day, Bethany returned with newborn Lily, spinning a tale about premature birth and wanting to get through the dangerous period before sharing the news. Richard, though initially hurt by the secrecy, was quickly enchanted by his tiny daughter. If he noticed that Lily didn't look premature or questioned the mathematics of a supposedly 7-month baby weighing 8 pounds, he never said so. And so our household expanded to include a third child, another baby for me to rock through sleepless nights, Another innocent life caught in Bethany's web of deception. Another reason I couldn't walk away. With Lily's arrival, my life transformed completely. Any remnants of personal time or independent identity vanished as I embraced the role of full-time caregiver to 3 young children. My days began before dawn, with Lily's morning feeding, and ended long after midnight with her final bottle. The hours between were filled with kindergarten drop-offs for Emma, playgroups for Jacob, endless laundry, meal preparations, and the 1,000 tiny tasks that constitute raising children. Friends stopped calling after I canceled lunch dates one too many times. My book club removed me from their email list after 6 months of absences. My sister Barbara's invitations to visit Arizona became increasingly infrequent, eventually tapering to holiday cards and occasional phone calls. "You've given up your life for these children," Barbara said during one rare conversation when I managed to call while all 3 kids were napping simultaneously. "It's not right, Martha. You should be traveling, dating, enjoying retirement, not changing diapers and making school lunches." "They need me," I responded simply, though the truth was more complicated. I needed them too. After Paul died, my grandchildren had become my purpose, my joy, my reason for getting up each morning despite the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. There were moments of pure magic that made the sacrifice worthwhile, Emma learning to read and proudly sharing storybooks with her siblings. Jacob's contagious laughter when I pushed him on the swings at the park. Lily's first steps, taken toward me with her arms outstretched and a gummy smile lighting her face. But there were also costs I hadn't anticipated. The physical toll of childcare in my late 50s was significant. My knees ached from constantly kneeling to clean up spills and pick up toys. My back spasmed from carrying Lily in her car seat. My energy reserves depleted faster each year, leaving me bone-tired by dinner time yet still facing hours of childcare before I could rest. Richard's presence in the home diminished as his career advanced. His partnership came with international clients, requiring frequent travel. When he was home, he was a loving but somewhat awkward parent, uncertain how to connect with children whose daily routines and preferences he barely knew. "They adore you, Mom," he once commented after the children ran to me instead of him when they needed help with a puzzle. "I don't know how we'd manage without you." I smiled tightly, not voicing the thought that immediately sprang to mind. They wouldn't be managing at all if I weren't there. Bethany's parenting consisted primarily of occasional shopping trips with the girls, where she bought them expensive outfits for photos, or taking Jacob for haircuts where she could chat with the stylist while he sat immobilized in the chair. The financial strain of our situation became impossible to ignore when I discovered Richard had been gambling. It started small, sports betting to blow off steam, poker nights with colleagues that stretched into online games. But the losses mounted, hidden at first behind refinanced mortgages and maxed credit cards. I discovered the extent of the problem when I found an overdraft notice while paying household bills, a task Richard had delegated to me years ago. Further investigation revealed multiple accounts in collection, late payments on the mortgage, and a home equity line of credit nearly maxed out. That evening, after the children were asleep, I confronted my son. "Richard, we need to talk about the financial situation." He looked up from his laptop, tired eyes squinting in confusion. "What about it?" I placed the stack of bills and notices on the table between us. "You're in serious trouble." "How long has this been going on?" His face crumpled like a child caught in wrongdoing. "I didn't want you to worry. I've been handling it." "This isn't handling it," I said gently. "The mortgage is 3 months behind. There are collection notices for credit cards I didn't even know existed. Richard, talk to me." The story emerged in painful fragments. The pressure of partnership, Bethany's spending, the increasing emotional distance in their marriage, all had driven him to seek escape in gambling. What started as recreation had become compulsion, then addiction. "I'll fix it," he promised, eyes downcast. "I'm going to cut back on spending, work harder, make it right." But the following week, another collection notice arrived, and the week after that, I overheard Richard on the phone pleading with someone for more time to pay. I made the hardest decision of my life that afternoon. I withdrew the remainder of my retirement savings, money I had earmarked for my own future security, and used it to bring the mortgage current and pay off the most pressing debts. When I presented Richard with the receipts, he broke down completely. "I'll pay you back every penny, Mom," I swear. I shook my head. What I need from you isn't repayment. It's change. These children need their father, not just his paycheck, but his presence. And you need help with your gambling. Professional help. Richard enrolled in Gamblers Anonymous the next day. It was the first step in what would be a long journey toward recovery, but it gave me hope that perhaps our dysfunctional family system could begin to heal. Meanwhile, Bethany's absences grew longer and her return visits shorter. She missed Emma's ballet recital because of a spa weekend, Jacob's preschool graduation for a concert with friends, Lily's second birthday for a yoga retreat. The children stopped asking when Mommy was coming home. Instead, we built our own family traditions. Sunday pancake breakfasts where Emma helped measure ingredients and Jacob stirred the batter while Lily banged happily on pots with wooden spoons. Summer evenings catching fireflies in the backyard. Bedtime stories where each child got to choose one book. All of us piled onto my queen-sized bed in a tangle of small limbs and shared warmth. By my 58th birthday, I was experiencing concerning health symptoms, persistent high blood pressure, joint pain diagnosed as early arthritis, episodes of chest tightness my doctor attributed to anxiety and stress. He prescribed medication and suggested lifestyle changes, eyeing me sympathetically when I explained my childcare responsibilities. Martha, he said gently, you're doing the work of someone half your age with 3 times your energy reserves. The human body can only sustain that level of stress for so long before something gives. I brushed off his concerns. They need me. What choice do I have? What I didn't say was that I feared the answer. That increasingly, I lay awake at night wondering how many more years I could continue this pace. That sometimes, in my darkest moments, I fantasized about walking away to a quiet apartment where no one needed anything from me. The guilt these thoughts produced was almost as exhausting as the caregiving itself. On my birthday, only Emma remembered. She presented me with a handmade card featuring a crayon drawing of our family, Emma, Jacob, Lily, Richard, and me in the center, larger than everyone else with a crown on my head. Bethany was notably absent from the picture. Happy birthday, Gamma, she said, throwing her arms around my neck. You're the best Gamma in the whole universe. I held her tight, blinking back tears. For better or worse, I had made my choice years ago. These children were my world now, and I would continue to be theirs for as long as my strength held out. I had no idea that the breaking point was just around the corner. 2 more years passed in our unusual family arrangement. Emma had grown into a serious, responsible 10-year-old who helped with her siblings and excelled academically despite the chaotic home environment. Jacob, now 7, had overcome his earlier behavioral problems and found his confidence through Little League Baseball, where his natural athletic ability shone. Lily, at 3, was a bright, curious chatterbox who followed me everywhere, helping with household tasks and peppering me with endless questions about how the world worked. Despite the increasing health problems that plagued me, worsening arthritis in my hands and knees, chronic exhaustion, and blood pressure that remained stubbornly high despite medication, I found genuine joy in watching these children thrive. They had formed a tight sibling bond, with Emma taking on a protective role toward her younger brother and sister. When Jacob was bullied at school, it was Emma who marched up to the principal's office to report it. When Lily had nightmares, it was often Jacob who would comfort her until I could get there. My 58th birthday passed with only Emma remembering again. She made me a beautiful watercolor painting of our favorite park. Richard called late that evening with apologies, promising a belated celebration that never materialized. Bethany, unsurprisingly, didn't acknowledge the day at all. Bethany had just returned from what she called a wellness retreat in Sedona, a month-long absence during which she had posted daily photos of spa treatments, yoga sessions, and sunset cocktails on social media. She breezed into the house with expensive new luggage, her face noticeably tighter and lips fuller than when she'd left. Botox and fillers, she announced without prompting, catching me studying her face. Everyone's doing it. You should try it, Martha. It would take years off. I bit back a retort about how chasing 3 young children had aged me more than time ever could, instead asking, "Did you bring anything back for the kids?" "They missed you." Her expression flickered with brief guilt before she produced 3 hastily wrapped packages from her designer tote bag. Of course I did. I'm not a monster. The presents, a glittery notebook for Emma, a toy car for Jacob, and a plastic tiara for Lily, were clearly airport gift shop purchases, the tags barely removed. Still, the children thanked her politely when they returned from school, though I noticed none of them ran to hug her as they once might have. That evening, while preparing dinner, I discovered an eviction notice tucked among the mail Richard had brought home. The shock nearly made me drop the casserole dish I was holding. 3 months behind on mortgage payments again, with foreclosure proceedings set to begin in 30 days. After the children were asleep, I confronted Richard in his home office, where he was ostensibly working late but actually staring blankly at his computer screen. "You promised," I said simply, placing the notice before him. "You promised you were handling things." Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I thought I was. The firm cut bonuses this year. Bethany's retreat cost more than we budgeted. And I slipped. Just a few times. Gambling again?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Online. It started small, just to take the edge off after bad days. Then I tried to win back what I'd lost. And..." He gestured helplessly at the eviction notice. "Does Bethany know? Are you kidding? She'd leave in a heartbeat if she knew we might lose the house." He ran his hands through his thinning hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart ached. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I've failed at everything, my marriage, my career, being a father. I've even failed at gambling." His attempt at humor fell flat as his voice cracked on the last word. In that moment, I saw not the accomplished attorney approaching 40, but the little boy who had come to me with skinned knees and bruised pride, looking for me to fix what was broken. And just as I had then, I made his problems mine to solve. "I have some money left," I said, mentally calculating the small emergency fund I'd managed to set aside from my Social Security checks. Not enough to clear everything, but maybe enough to keep the roof over our heads while you get back on your feet. Richard's head snapped up. "Mom, no. You've already given too much. Your retirement savings are gone," I finished for him. "That's water under the bridge now. But these children need stability, and that starts with a home." The next day, I withdrew my emergency fund, nearly $12,000 I'd squirreled away for a nebulous future where I might need assisted living or medical care. It was enough to bring the mortgage current and pay 1 month ahead, buying us some breathing room. When Bethany discovered the financial crisis had been averted, she showed no gratitude, only relief that her lifestyle could continue uninterrupted. "Thank God," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Jason and I have a couples massage scheduled next week that's non-refundable." I stared at her, momentarily stunned by her brazenness. "Jason? You're still seeing him?" She glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "Did you think that was over?" "Please. He's the only thing keeping me sane in this domestic prison. You do realize that domestic prison is your family? Your children? Your husband who works himself to exhaustion trying to make you happy?" Bethany rolled her eyes. "Save the lecture, Martha. We all have our coping mechanisms. Richard has his gambling, I have Jason. At least my vice doesn't cost us the house." I wanted to argue that her extravagant spending and month-long retreats certainly contributed to our financial strain, but I knew the conversation was pointless. Bethany had long ago constructed a reality where she was the victim of circumstances rather than their architect. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I spoke with Richard about his recovery, insisting he return to Gamblers Anonymous and consider therapy for the underlying issues driving his addiction. I created a strict household budget, cutting luxuries and finding creative ways to reduce expenses. I even looked into part-time work I could do from home while the younger children napped, eventually securing a position grading standardized tests online. Meanwhile, my health continued to deteriorate. The chest pains I'd experienced occasionally now came more frequently, especially during times of stress. At my annual checkup, my doctor's concern was evident as he reviewed my test results. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high despite medication, Martha," he said gravely. "And these chest pain episodes, they're warning signs. Your body is telling you it can't sustain this level of stress much longer." "What are you saying exactly?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm saying that if something doesn't change, you're heading for a heart attack or stroke. At your age, with your family history, Your father died of a heart attack at 60, your husband at 52. This isn't something to ignore. I thought of Paul, collapsing in our garden while planting tomatoes, gone before the ambulance arrived. I thought of my father, found slumped over his desk by my mother, equally sudden. Both strong men, cut down without warning. What do you recommend? I asked quietly. Dramatic lifestyle changes. Reduce your stress levels immediately. Consider handing off some of your childcare responsibilities. Focus on your own health for once. I nodded automatically, knowing even as I did that, I had no intention of following this advice. Who would care for the children if I stepped back? Richard was barely hanging on, and Bethany had never been a real parent to them. They would end up with nannies or in daycare. Their sense of security shattered yet again. As I left the doctor's office, I made a silent promise to myself. I would find a way to gradually transition, to build more independence into our family system, so that eventually I could step back without everything collapsing. I would train Emma to help more with her siblings, encourage Richard to take a more active parenting role, perhaps even find ways to incentivize Bethany to engage more consistently. It was a good plan, reasonable and measured. I just needed time to implement it gradually, minimizing trauma to the children. Time, as it turned out, was the one thing I didn't have. I spent the following month implementing small changes to begin my gradual transition plan. I taught Emma to make simple breakfasts for her siblings on weekends, giving me an extra hour of rest. I encouraged Richard to take Jacob to his baseball practices rather than just games, creating father-son bonding time. I even approached Bethany about establishing a regular mommy day with Lily, suggesting they could go shopping together. An activity Bethany actually enjoyed. These modest adjustments were beginning to bear fruit. Richard seemed to genuinely enjoy his baseball outings with Jacob, often returning with animated stories about his son's improving skills. Emma took pride in her new responsibilities, and Lily had stopped clinging quite so desperately to me, occasionally allowing Bethany to brush her hair or read her a story without protest. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was progress. I began to hope that perhaps, with time, I could create a family system that didn't depend entirely on my constant presence and sacrifice. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Richard had reached a significant milestone in his recovery program, 1 month completely gambling-free. To celebrate, I planned a special family meal, preparing Richard's favorites: pot roast with roasted vegetables, homemade rolls, and chocolate layer cake for dessert. Emma helped set the table with our good dishes, while Jacob made place cards for everyone. Even Lily contributed, arranging slightly wilted flowers from the garden in a vase for the centerpiece. "Where's Mom?" Richard asked as we finished preparations. I thought she'd be home by now. As if on cue, we heard Bethany's car pull into the driveway. She swept in 20 minutes late, dressed in a new outfit I'd never seen, her hair freshly styled and makeup immaculate. "Sorry I'm late," she announced without sounding particularly sorry. The salon was running behind. "But don't I look fabulous?" She twirled, showing off her ensemble. "You look very pretty, Mommy," Lily offered shyly. Bethany barely acknowledged the compliment, already moving toward her seat. "What's the occasion again?" "I know Richard told me, but I've had such a busy day." I bit back my irritation, as Richard patiently explained. 1 month in recovery. No gambling. "Oh, right," Bethany said, helping herself to a roll. "Good job, honey." Dinner progressed with forced pleasantness. Richard talked about a new client at work. Emma described her science project on butterfly metamorphosis. Jacob recounted his coach's praise of his pitching improvement. Bethany scrolled through her phone beneath the table, occasionally making non-committal sounds of acknowledgement when directly addressed. As I served the chocolate cake, Bethany suddenly put down her phone and cleared her throat. "Since everyone's sharing news, I have an announcement too." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I carefully set down the cake server, bracing myself. "I'm pregnant," she declared, smiling broadly. "Just found out yesterday." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's fork clattered against his plate. Emma's eyes darted between the adults. Sensing tension, Jacob continued eating cake, oblivious, while Lily watched with wide eyes. Richard recovered first. "Wow." That's unexpected. But wonderful, he added hastily, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. How far along are you? About 8 weeks, Bethany said, pulling out her phone again. Look, I already have the ultrasound picture. Isn't it amazing? As she passed her phone around the table, my chest began to tighten. Another baby. Another innocent child to be born into this dysfunction. Another life that would inevitably become my responsibility. While Bethany played mother on social media, and Richard worked himself to exhaustion trying to support us all, the room seemed to spin slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself and my racing thoughts. I was 58 years old. My health was already compromised. I had given everything: my home, my savings, my retirement, my social life, my very identity, to this family. There was nothing left to give. Bethany's voice cut through my spiraling panic. Of course, I'll need to take a proper baby moon this time. I was thinking Thailand, or maybe Bali. 2 weeks minimum. Richard looked concerned. Honey, I'm not sure we can afford. Oh, don't be such a downer, Bethany interrupted. We'll figure it out. We always do. Besides, she added with a casual wave in my direction, Grandma will handle everything as usual while we're gone. Right, Martha? Something inside me snapped at her presumption, her casual expectation of my continuing sacrifice. No, I said quietly. Conversations around the table halted. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean, no? Bethany asked, her voice dangerously sweet. I mean no. I won't be handling everything as usual, I clarified, my voice growing stronger. I can't do this anymore, Bethany. Not again. Not a fourth child. Bethany's eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic, Martha. It's just one more. You've managed fine so far. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a squeezing pressure that made it difficult to breathe. Excuse me, I managed, standing abruptly. I need some air. I walked with measured steps to my bedroom, closed the door, and sank onto the bed. The pain in my chest intensified, radiating down my left arm. My doctor's warning echoed in my mind. If something doesn't change, you're heading for a heart attack or stroke. I focused on breathing slowly, trying to calm myself. Gradually, the pain subsided, leaving me exhausted but clear-headed. In that moment of clarity, I knew what I had to do. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed and began methodically packing essentials, clothes, medications, important documents. As I worked, memories flashed through my mind. Emma's first steps toward my outstretched arms. Jacob's face lighting up when I cheered at his baseball games. Lily's giggles as I swung her around in the garden. Tears streamed down my face, but my resolve didn't waver. For their sakes as much as mine, I had to leave. I couldn't be the safety net enabling this dysfunctional system anymore. And selfishly, perhaps, I couldn't watch another baby be born into this situation, knowing I would inevitably become responsible for raising it while my own health deteriorated further. I wrote 3 letters, one each for Emma, Jacob, and Lily, explaining in age-appropriate terms that I loved them desperately but needed to take care of my health. I promised to stay in touch and remain their loving grandmother. Just in a different way. As I sealed the final envelope, a soft knock came at my door. Gamma? Emma's voice called. Are you okay? I'll be out in a minute, sweetheart, I called back, hastily wiping my tears and hiding the letters in my purse. I returned to the dining room to find the cake half-eaten, the children subdued, and Richard and Bethany in what appeared to be a tense standoff. Mom, are you feeling better? Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. Before I could answer, Bethany cut in. Your mother is being ridiculous. Acting like a 4th grandchild is some kind of tragedy. It's not about the baby, I said quietly. It's about the pattern. It's about what this family has become and my role in enabling it. I turned to Richard. Son, I love you and my grandchildren more than anything in this world. But I can't do this anymore. Not like this. Richard's face paled. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying I need to leave. My doctor has warned me that my health is in serious jeopardy from the stress. I've emptied my retirement accounts, drained my emergency fund, and given up my entire life to raise your children while you work and Bethany does whatever Bethany does. But I can't continue. Not with a fourth child on the way. You can't be serious, Richard said, his voice rising in panic. We need you. The kids need you. They need parents. I corrected gently. Real, present, engaged parents. Not a grandmother running herself into an early grave trying to fill the void. I stood, steadier now that my decision was made. I've packed some things. I'll stay at the Holiday Inn until I figure out next steps. You're actually leaving? Bethany asked, seeming genuinely shocked that her behavior might have consequences. Just like that? Just like that, I confirmed, meeting her eyes without flinching. The children have my cell number. They can call me any time. As I retrieved my suitcase from the bedroom, I heard the eruption of voices behind me, Bethany's indignant protests, Richard's pleading, and worst of all, Emma's tearful questions. My heart broke a little more with each step toward the door, but I forced myself to continue. Richard intercepted me at the front entrance, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Mom, please. We can work something out. Hire help. Adjust schedules, whatever you need. Just don't go like this. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the boy I'd raised, now lost in a man who had surrendered his power to addiction and an empty marriage. I love you, Richard. That will never change. But sometimes love means not enabling harmful patterns to continue. You're stronger than you think. These children deserve parents who are present for them, not just physically, but emotionally. Figure it out. With those words, I walked out the door, got into my car, and drove away from the only life I'd known for the past decade. In my rearview mirror, I could see Richard standing in the doorway, my grandchildren clustered around his legs, all watching me leave. This time, I was choosing myself, and praying that in doing so, I might ultimately be choosing them too. The Holiday Inn off I-25 became my temporary sanctuary. The bland neutrality of the room, beige walls, generic artwork, stiff sheets, provided an oddly comforting contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. For the first time in years, I answered to no one. No midnight cries interrupted my sleep. No breakfast needed preparing at dawn. No school lunches to pack or laundry to fold. The physical relief was immediate and undeniable. Within days, my blood pressure readings began to stabilize. The persistent ache in my joints receded from screaming pain to manageable discomfort. Even my breathing seemed easier, as though a weight had been physically lifted from my chest. But the emotional toll was devastating. Guilt crushed me in waves, especially in the quiet early mornings when I'd normally be helping Emma with her hair or coaxing Jacob to finish his breakfast. The silence of the room, once a novelty, quickly became oppressive, filled with imagined sounds of my grandchildren calling for their gamma. My phone vibrated constantly for the first 48 hours, dozens of calls and texts from Richard, his voice messages evolving from anger to bargaining to panic. How could you just leave like that? The kids are devastated. Mom, please come home. We can hire a nanny, get more help, whatever you need. I don't know what to do. Lily won't stop crying for you. Jacob wet the bed. Emma's refusing to speak to anyone. Please, Mom. I listened to each message, tears streaming down my face, but didn't return the calls. I needed time to sort through my own emotions, to establish boundaries before re-engaging. I had spent so many years prioritizing everyone else's needs that I barely recognized my own anymore. On the third day, Emma called from her school's office phone during lunch break. Gamma? Her voice was small, uncertain. Are you ever coming back? Daddy says you're sick. My heart constricted. Oh, sweetheart. I'm not sick exactly, but I need to take care of my health right now. That doesn't mean I don't love you all very, very much. But we need you, she said, a tremor in her voice. Lily keeps asking where you went. Jacob is angry all the time, and Daddy looks scared. I closed my eyes against fresh tears. Emma, sometimes adults have to make hard choices to take care of themselves. Remember how you taught Jacob about putting on his own oxygen mask first if there's trouble on an airplane? Before helping others, she finished. Because you can't help if you pass out. Exactly. Right now, I need to put on my own oxygen mask. But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. We'll still talk, and I'll still see you, just in a different way for a while. After hanging up, I called my sister Barbara in Phoenix. We'd drifted apart over the years as my caregiving responsibilities consumed me, but she answered on the second ring. "Martha, is everything okay?" The simple question broke something in me. I found myself sobbing into the phone, the whole story pouring out in disjointed fragments. Bethany's neglect, Richard's gambling, the financial struggles, the 3 children I'd essentially raised, and now a 4th pregnancy that had finally broken me. "I left them, Barbara," I confessed through tears. "I just walked out on my grandchildren." "No," Barbara corrected firmly. "You stopped enabling a dysfunctional situation that was literally killing you. There's a difference." Her unconditional support was like a lifeline. By the end of our conversation, I had a plan. I would stay with Barbara temporarily while I figured out next steps. She would fly out to help me drive to Arizona the following week, giving me time to arrange a proper transition rather than the abrupt departure I'd made in my moment of crisis. The morning after my call with Emma, there was a knock at my hotel room door. Through the peephole, I saw Richard, unshaven and hollow-eyed, looking nothing like the polished attorney he presented to the world. I opened the door, steeling myself. "Richard." "Mum." His voice cracked. "Can I come in?" He sat heavily on the edge of the bed while I took the desk chair, maintaining physical distance that matched our emotional one. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Credit card statement," he admitted. "I should have respected your privacy, but I was desperate." We sat in uncomfortable silence before he spoke again. "I didn't realize. I never saw." He struggled to articulate his thoughts. "The kids are a mess without you, and seeing them like this made me realize how much you've been doing all these years. How completely I've failed as a father." "You haven't failed," I said gently. "You've been absent. There's a difference. Absence can be corrected." "And Bethany," his voice hardened. "It's like she doesn't even care that you're gone. She complained about having to make breakfast for the kids." "Breakfast, Mom." As if that's some Herculean task for a mother of 3. I remained silent, allowing him to come to his own conclusions rather than influencing them with my long-held opinions of his wife. "I came home early yesterday," he continued. "The school called because Jacob had a meltdown in class. When I got to the house, Lily was still in her pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. Unfed. Unwashed. Bethany was locked in our bedroom, on the phone, laughing. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. She was on the phone with someone named Jason, talking about spa treatments for her baby moon, while my daughter sat outside the door, crying for her. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry, Richard." "No," he said firmly. "I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. Sorry I let my addiction blind me to what you were carrying. Sorry I expected my mother to raise my children while their actual mother checked out and I worked myself to exhaustion avoiding the truth." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "You were right to leave. I see that now." His acknowledgement loosened something in my chest. For years, I'd carried not just the burden of childcare but the weight of unspoken truths about our family. Having Richard finally see reality was both validating and freeing. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "But I know it can't go back to how it was. I've taken family leave from work, 2 months. I'm going to learn how to be a real father to my children. And Bethany." He hesitated. "I've contacted a family lawyer." I nodded, neither encouraging nor discouraging this decision. It had to be his choice entirely. "Would you be willing to help us transition?" he asked. "Not moving back in, not taking over again. Just helping me learn what I need to know about the kids' routines, their needs, being a presence while they adjust to the changes." It was a reasonable request, one that acknowledged my boundaries while respecting my bond with the children. "Yes," I agreed. "I can do that. And I've asked my sister Barbara to come help too. She'll be here next week." Richard's relief was palpable. "Thank you, Mom." When he left, I felt a strange mixture of grief and hope. There would be difficult days ahead, but perhaps my leaving had created the crisis necessary for real change to begin. That evening, I received a text from Richard with a photo attached. He had made a simple dinner, spaghetti and salad, and the children were seated around the table. Emma helping Lily twirl pasta on her fork, Jacob mid-laugh at something. The caption read, "First family dinner I've cooked in years." They said it wasn't as good as Gamma's, but they ate it anyway. I smiled through fresh tears, saving the image. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. The following day, I returned to the house while the children were at school to collect more of my belongings and leave the letters I'd written them. Richard met me at the door, looking marginally better than the day before. "Bethany's gone," he said without preamble. "Stayed at a hotel last night after we had it out." I nodded, unsurprised. "How are you feeling about that?" "Honestly?" "Relieved." He helped me carry my suitcases to the guest room that had been my home for nearly a decade. It's like the fog is finally lifting. I can see everything clearly for the first time, what she's been doing, what I've been avoiding, what you've been carrying. As we sorted through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave, he filled me in on the explosive confrontation that had occurred after he returned from seeing me. "I asked her point blank about Jason," Richard recounted. "She denied it at first. Then when I showed her the phone records, she just shrugged. Like it was nothing. Then had the nerve to say it was my fault for being absent." "And the pregnancy?" I asked cautiously. His jaw tightened. "She claims it's mine, but honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore." I told her I want a paternity test. We worked in companionable silence for a while, the years of shared history between us making words unnecessary. As I packed photo albums and mementos, I felt both the weight of what was ending and the possibility of what might begin. Late that afternoon, I heard the front door open and children's voices fill the hallway. My heart raced at the sound. Richard looked at me questioningly. I nodded, and he went to intercept them. "Kids," I heard him say. "Gamma is here to visit for a little while." There was a moment of stunned silence, then the thunder of feet racing down the hallway. Emma reached me first, colliding with me in a fierce hug that nearly knocked me over. Jacob was seconds behind, wrapping his arms around my waist. Lily, toddling in last, reached up with grabby hands until I lifted her, her little arms circling my neck in a stranglehold of love. "You came back," Emma whispered against my shoulder. "For a visit," I clarified gently, meeting Richard's eyes over their heads. "I'm going to stay with Aunt Barbara for a while, but I'll still see you often. And your daddy is going to be home more now." "Where's Mommy?" Jacob asked, looking around. Richard knelt to their level. "Mommy is staying at a hotel for a few days. We need to talk to you about some changes that are happening in our family." As he guided the children to the living room for what would be a difficult conversation, I hung back, giving them space. This was Richard's moment to step up as their father, to begin the healing process that my departure had catalyzed. Standing in the hallway, surrounded by the photos of these children I loved so deeply, I felt both the pain of separation and the rightness of my decision. Sometimes, the most loving choice isn't the easiest one. Sometimes, true love means letting go enough for others to grow into their own strength. The week that followed was one of profound transition for our family. Barbara arrived from Phoenix as promised, her practical nature and fresh perspective bringing welcome balance to our emotional household. Together, we helped Richard establish new routines with the children, morning schedules, homework systems, meal planning, and bedtime rituals that he could manage independently. "The key is consistency," I explained as we created a family calendar for the refrigerator. "Children thrive on knowing what to expect. It makes them feel secure, especially during times of change." Richard, to his credit, approached his crash course in parenting with determination and humility. He took notes during bath time, practiced braiding Emma's hair, with mixed results that improved daily, and learned each child's particular comfort techniques for difficult moments. Jacob needed physical activity to process emotions, while Emma required quiet conversation, and Lily responded best to being held and rocked. "How did you figure all this out?" he asked, one evening after successfully navigating a meltdown from Lily without my intervention. "Time and attention," I answered simply. "When you really observe children, they show you what they need. You just have to be present enough to notice." The children's reactions to the changing family dynamic varied. Emma, perceptive and mature beyond her years, seemed to understand that my departure had triggered necessary changes. She divided her time between helping Richard with her siblings and quietly processing her own feelings, often sitting with me on the porch swing, asking thoughtful questions about why adults make the choices they do. "Are you happier now, Gamma?" she asked on our 5th day of transition. I considered my answer carefully. "I'm healthier," I said finally. "And I'm learning that it's okay to take care of myself, not just everyone else. That's an important lesson I hope you'll learn much earlier than I did." Jacob alternated between anger and clinginess, testing boundaries with Richard while seeking constant reassurance from me that I wasn't disappearing forever. His baseball coach reported outbursts at practice, and his teacher emailed about declining classroom participation. "He's grieving," Barbara observed as we watched Jacob aggressively kick a soccer ball against the fence. "All three of them are, in their ways. Not just your physical presence, but the stability you represented. The certainty of their world has been shaken." Lily, at 3, had the least understanding but perhaps the strongest reaction. She developed separation anxiety, screaming when Richard left for even brief errands and following me from room to room during my visits. Her vocabulary, which had been expanding rapidly, regressed to simpler phrases and more frequent crying. Richard scheduled appointments with a family therapist, recognizing that professional support would be essential for helping the children process these changes. The first session was challenging but productive, providing a safe space for Emma and Jacob to express their fears and confusion. "I'm scared Gamma will forget about us," Jacob admitted during the session. "I'm afraid Daddy will leave too," Emma whispered. "Daddy work all time," Lily added, her simple statement perhaps the most cutting of all. Richard knelt before them, tears in his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "And neither is Gamma, even though she'll be living in a different house. We're still a family, just a changing one. And part of that change is that I'm going to be a much better, more present father to you all." The therapist suggested regular video calls with me when I moved to Arizona, established routines that Richard would maintain consistently, and special one-on-one time for each child with both Richard and me to rebuild security and trust. Meanwhile, Bethany's presence became increasingly sporadic. After her initial hotel stay, she returned briefly, creating tension and disruption before leaving again when confronted with actual parenting responsibilities. During one particularly revealing incident, she complained about having to watch Lily while Richard took Emma to the dentist. "This is why we need your mother here," she snapped. "I have a life too, you know." "These are your children," Richard replied with newfound firmness. "Not Martha's, yours and mine." Bethany's response was telling. "Well, they've always been more hers anyway. They barely even know me." "And whose choice was that?" Richard asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, unanswered but illuminating. Later that day, Bethany announced she was staying with a friend for a while to give everyone space. The children barely reacted to her departure, so accustomed were they to her absences. A week after Bethany left, Richard received a call from the family lawyer he had consulted. They met privately, and when he returned home, his expression was grim but resolute. "I've filed for divorce," he told me after the children were asleep, "and I'm requesting full custody." I nodded, unsurprised but concerned. "How do you think Bethany will respond?" "That's the thing," he said, a mixture of anger and sadness in his voice. "When I called to tell her, she didn't fight it at all. She said, and I quote, 'Fine by me. I was never cut out for the mommy thing anyway. Just make sure I get a fair settlement.'" The casualness with which she abandoned her children should have shocked me, but after years of witnessing her detachment, it merely confirmed what I had long suspected. Bethany had never truly bonded with her children. They had been props in her social media life, accessories to be displayed when convenient, and handed off when demanding actual parenting. "What about the baby?" I asked hesitantly. Richard's expression hardened. "I told her I want a paternity test as soon as medically safe. She laughed and said I could have full custody of that one too if it turns out to be mine." He shook his head in disbelief. "How could I have been so blind, Mom? For so long? Love can be blinding," I said gently. "And sometimes we see what we want to see, not what's actually there." 2 days later, Emma overheard a phone conversation between Bethany and Richard about custody arrangements. When Bethany casually mentioned being free from the mom trap, Emma confronted her during her next brief visit to collect more clothing. "You don't want us, do you?" Emma asked, her young face solemn. "You never did." Bethany, caught off guard, attempted her usual deflection. "Don't be silly, sweetie. Mommy just needs some me time right now." "You always need me time," Emma replied with the devastating clarity of a child. "But moms are supposed to want kid time too." "Gamma always wanted kid time with us." Bethany's face hardened. "Well, I'm not your precious Gamma, am I? We can't all be perfect mother figures like Martha." "No," Emma agreed sadly, "you can't." The interaction, witnessed by both Richard and me, marked a turning point in Emma's processing of the family changes. That night, as I tucked her into bed during one of my regular visits, she asked a question that broke my heart. "Is there something wrong with us, Gamma? Is that why Mommy doesn't want to be with us?" I gathered her close, choosing my words carefully. "There is absolutely nothing wrong with you, or Jacob, or Lily. You are perfect, wonderful children who deserve all the love in the world. Sometimes, adults have their own issues that have nothing to do with their children." "Your mother." I hesitated, not wanting to disparage Bethany, but needing to be honest. "Your mother is one of those people who finds it difficult to connect with others, including her children. That's about her, not about you." Emma considered this, her wise old soul shining through young eyes. "Like how Jacob is allergic to peanuts. It's not the peanuts' fault. His body just can't handle them right." I smiled at her perfect analogy. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Your mother's heart just doesn't process love and connection the way most hearts do, and that's very sad for her, because she's missing out on knowing 3 amazing children." As we established new patterns in our reconfigured family, I maintained firm boundaries while remaining lovingly present. I visited several times a week, but returned to my hotel each night. I attended important events and helped with transitions, but stepped back to allow Richard to handle daily parenting challenges. It was a delicate balance, being there without taking over, supporting without enabling. The children's initial panic at my absence gradually eased as they realized I wasn't truly gone from their lives, just participating differently. Richard's consistent presence and growing confidence as a father provided the security they needed to adapt. Meanwhile, my health noticeably improved. My blood pressure stabilized, the chest pains ceased entirely, and even my arthritic joints caused less distress with reduced physical demands. I began taking short walks each morning, gradually increasing the distance as my stamina improved. I joined Barbara for gentle yoga classes and discovered I could touch my toes for the first time in years. "You look 10 years younger," Barbara commented as we prepared for our drive to Arizona. "There's color in your cheeks again." The night before our planned departure, Richard invited me for a private dinner after the children were asleep. He had ordered food from my favorite Italian restaurant and set the dining room table with candles and flowers. "What's all this?" I asked, touched by the gesture. "A proper thank you," he said, pulling out my chair, "and a proper goodbye, for now at least." Over pasta and wine, we talked openly about the past decade. The gradual erosion of healthy boundaries, the enabling patterns we had both fallen into, the price paid by everyone involved. "I want to apologize," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "not just for the past few years, but for not seeing what was happening, for allowing my children's welfare and your health to become collateral damage in my broken marriage." "We all played our parts," I acknowledged. "I could have set boundaries years ago. Should have, probably. But I was so afraid of losing the children, of them suffering if I stepped back. Instead, you suffered," Richard said quietly. "And eventually, that hurt them too." "We're healing now," I reminded him. "All of us, in our different ways." Before dessert, Richard presented me with an envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial amount. Not enough to replace my depleted retirement accounts, but certainly enough to establish a comfortable new life in Arizona. "I can't accept this," I protested. "You can and you will," he insisted. "It's not charity, Mom. It's restitution, a small fraction of what you've given us." When I still hesitated, he added, "Please, let me begin to make amends in the ways that I can." I finally accepted, recognizing that his need to make this gesture was as important as my future financial security. As we embraced at the end of the evening, I felt the shift in our relationship. from mother and child to two adults with mutual respect and understanding. It was bittersweet but necessary, this new equilibrium we were finding. "We're going to be okay," he whispered against my hair. "All of us, in our new configurations. And it's because you were brave enough to break the pattern." The next morning, as Barbara and I loaded the final bags into her car for our journey to Arizona, the children gathered on the front lawn for goodbyes. There were tears, of course, Lily's confused wailing, Jacob's angry sniffles, Emma's quiet dignity even as tears streamed down her face. But there was also Richard, steady and present, holding them together as a father should. "This isn't goodbye forever," I reminded them, kneeling despite protesting knees to gather them close one last time. "It's just goodbye for now. We'll video chat every week. You'll visit me during school breaks, and I'll come back for special occasions." "Promise?" Jacob demanded. "Promise," I confirmed, crossing my heart. As we drove away, I watched them in the side mirror, my son and my grandchildren, standing together and waving until we turned the corner. My heart ached with love and loss, but underneath was a current of something new and unfamiliar. Freedom. Not freedom from them, never that, but freedom from a role that had been slowly crushing me. For the first time in a decade, I was driving toward a future of my own choosing. 6 months after my departure from Denver, I settled into a small but cheerful one-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from Barbara's home in Phoenix. The space was entirely my own, decorated with my favorite colors, arranged to suit my preferences, peaceful in a way my previous life hadn't been for years. Photos of Emma, Jacob, and Lily adorned every surface, their smiling faces reminding me daily of the love that transcended our physical separation. My health transformation continued steadily. Regular checkups showed my blood pressure had normalized, and I had lost 15 pounds without trying, simply a result of reduced stress and increased activity. The desert climate proved beneficial for my arthritis, the dry warmth easing joint pain that had plagued me in Colorado's damper environment. "Your doctor in Denver wouldn't recognize you," Barbara remarked as we returned from our morning water aerobics class, an activity I'd initially joined for health reasons, but continued for the joy of movement and the friendships formed with other women my age. She was right. The Martha who had left Denver, exhausted, overweight, in constant pain, bore little resemblance to the woman I was becoming. I'd found a new rhythm to life, one that balanced self-care with connection to others. The transition hadn't been seamless for any of us. The children experienced difficult adjustments in those first months, their emotions expressed in various ways. Emma threw herself into school and extracurricular activities, maintaining a perfect facade that occasionally cracked during our weekly video calls when she'd finally allow herself to cry. Jacob's anger manifested in behavioral problems at school until Richard enrolled him in a sports program that channeled his emotions productively. Lily suffered separation anxiety, carrying my photograph everywhere and sometimes refusing to speak to me during video chats, her small form of protest against a change she couldn't understand. Richard faced the steepest learning curve, navigating single parenthood while managing his legal career and the emotional fallout of his divorce. He reduced his work hours, transitioned to a less demanding position within his firm, and hired a part-time nanny to help with after-school care, practical solutions that allowed him to be more present for his children. Our communication evolved into a healthy new pattern. Richard called weekly to update me on the children's progress and occasionally to seek parenting advice. But he no longer relied on me to solve every problem. I offered guidance when asked, but respected his growing confidence as a father, celebrating the capable parent he was becoming. The most unexpected development came 3 months after my move to Arizona, when Richard called with news about Bethany. "She's given up custody completely," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and relief. "Not just visitation. She signed away all parental rights." "All of them?" I asked, stunned despite years of witnessing her detachment. "Even for the baby?" There was a heavy pause before Richard responded. "There is no baby, at least not one she's keeping." He explained that Bethany had chosen adoption for her 4th pregnancy, arranging a private placement with a couple from California. Paternity testing had confirmed Richard's suspicions. The baby wasn't his, though he admitted feeling conflicted emotions about the child he had briefly believed would be part of our family. "Part of me is relieved," he confessed, "but another part feels guilty for that relief." "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you honest," I assured him. and human. The adoption closed another chapter in our family's complicated story. The children, when told in age-appropriate ways that their mother had chosen a different path in life, processed the information with surprising resilience. "Does this mean Mommy won't be coming back at all?" Jacob asked during a family therapy session. "Yes, buddy," Richard answered gently. "Your mom has decided she can't be a parent right now. Maybe not ever. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean you're not loved. You have me, and Gamma, and Aunt Barbara, and so many people who love you very much." Emma, wise beyond her years, placed her hand over her brother's. "And we have each other, always." Our new family structure gradually stabilized. Richard and the children established their own traditions and rhythms, creating a home environment that was different from what had existed before, but healthy in its own way. Special Gamma days became highlights for all of us. Video calls where I read bedtime stories, sent care packages with homemade cookies and small treasures, and planned future visits. My life in Arizona expanded beyond family connections. I joined a book club at the local library, volunteered teaching English to immigrant families 2 mornings a week, and even began dating Stanley, a kind widower from my water aerobics class who took me to dinner and desert botanical garden walks. I never expected this chapter of life. I confided to Barbara over coffee one morning, after Paul died, then getting so consumed with the grandchildren, I thought that part of me was over. "The beautiful thing about life," she replied, "is that it's never actually over until it's over. There are always new chapters waiting to be written." 4 months after my move, Richard and the children made their first visit to Arizona during spring break. The reunion was joyous, but different from our previous dynamic. I was no longer the primary caregiver, but the beloved grandmother they were excited to see. We visited the Grand Canyon, explored the desert botanical garden, and spent lazy afternoons by Barbara's pool, building new memories without the weight of our previous roles. I noticed positive changes in all 3 children. Emma seemed lighter, less burdened by the pseudo-parental role she had adopted in the dysfunctional household. Jacob, channeling his emotions through baseball, proudly showed me his improved pitching technique. Even Lily, now 4, displayed new independence, proudly announcing I can do it myself at every opportunity. The most profound transformation, however, was in Richard. Fatherhood had reshaped him, bringing out strength and patience I had always hoped he possessed. He managed the children's schedule with calm competence, addressed behavioral issues with appropriate boundaries, and created space for both discipline and joy. "You're a wonderful father," I told him on their last night in Arizona, as we sat on my small patio watching the desert sunset while the children played inside with Barbara. "I had a good teacher," he replied, squeezing my hand. "I just wish I hadn't wasted so many years not seeing what was right in front of me." "We can't change the past," I said, "but you're showing up for them now, and that's what matters most." On the day of their departure, as we hugged goodbye at the airport, Lily looked up at me with serious eyes. "Gamma, are you happier here than with us?" The question momentarily stunned me. Before I could formulate a response, Emma interjected. "Gamma isn't happier without us, silly. She's happier taking care of herself so she can love us for a really long time. Right, Gamma?" I pulled Emma close, marveling at her insight. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Sometimes loving someone means making hard choices so you can be there for them in ways that are healthy for everyone." As I watched their plane take off, returning them to Denver and their evolving life there, I felt a profound peace replace the guilt that had plagued me in those first months after leaving. My decision to walk away had been an act not of abandonment but of love. Love for my grandchildren, my son, and finally, myself. 2 months later, I flew to Denver for Emma's 11th birthday. The house that had once been chaotic and tension-filled had transformed under Richard's care. Gone were Bethany's impractical white furniture and designer decorations, replaced by comfortable, child-friendly spaces filled with books, art supplies, and evidence of active family life. A large calendar dominated the kitchen wall, color-coded with each child's activities and special events. Chore charts, homework stations, and family photos created an atmosphere of organization and belonging. During my visit, I stayed in a nearby hotel rather than the guest room that had been my home for nearly a decade, a boundary that felt important to maintain. I participated in birthday celebrations and family meals, but stepped back when Richard handled bedtime routines or sibling conflicts, respecting his role as their parent. On my final evening there, after the children were asleep, Richard and I sat on the back porch swing that had witnessed so many family moments over the years. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" I asked. "For having the courage to leave." He gazed out at the yard where his children played daily. "If you had stayed, nothing would have changed. I would have continued working too much, relying on you too much. Bethany would have continued her absences. The kids would have had a grandmother instead of a father." He turned to meet my eyes. "Your leaving forced me to become the parent they deserved. It probably saved my life too. I was headed down a self-destructive path with the gambling, the workaholism." "You're the one who stepped up," I reminded him. "Many wouldn't have." "Maybe," he acknowledged. "But you gave me the opportunity to find out what I was capable of, what kind of father and man I could be when it really mattered." As he walked me to my rental car the next morning, he mentioned that Bethany had moved to Los Angeles permanently. "The kids ask about her less and less," he said. "The therapist says that's normal. They're adjusting to their new reality. Emma still has some anger to work through, but she's processing it healthily." "And you?" I asked. "How are you processing it all?" He considered the question seriously. "I'm at peace with it, mostly. The divorce was finalized last month. I'm focusing on the kids, my recovery, building the life we deserve." He smiled. "I've even started dating again, very casually, a divorced mom from Jacob's baseball team. We get coffee sometimes while the kids practice." The news warmed my heart. "I'm glad, Richard. You deserve happiness too." Driving away from the home that had been mine for so long felt different this time. Not an escape, but a transition, a natural movement between connected but separate lives. My grandchildren were thriving under their father's care. My son was becoming the man I had always known he could be, and I was building a life that honored both my love for them and my responsibility to myself. 6 months turned into a year. The weekly video calls continued, supplemented by visits in both directions. The children coming to Arizona during school breaks, me returning to Denver for special occasions. Technology bridged the physical distance, allowing me to remain an active presence in their lives without sacrificing my health or independence. The rhythm we established felt sustainable, respectful of everyone's needs and boundaries. Richard continued his growth as a father, finding balance between work and family that had seemed impossible before. The children flourished under his consistent care, their early struggles giving way to resilience and security in their reconfigured family unit. As for me, I discovered that stepping back from daily caregiving didn't diminish my relationship with my grandchildren, but transformed it into something equally meaningful. I was no longer the exhausted substitute parent, but the grandmother they chose to share their triumphs and troubles with, the safe harbor they sought when they needed perspective different from their father's. On a warm spring afternoon, as I watched the children playing in a park during their Easter visit to Arizona, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain of separation, the guilt of leaving, the uncertainty of change, all had been necessary steps toward healing, toward a family system that nurtured rather than depleted its members. Emma approached, sitting beside me on the bench. At 11, she stood on the cusp of adolescence, increasingly thoughtful and observant. "Gamma," she said, watching her siblings on the playground. "Remember when you first left and I was so mad at you?" "I remember," I acknowledged. "You had every right to those feelings." She nodded. "I didn't understand then, but I do now." She gestured toward Jacob, showing off his baseball skills to Stanley, and Lily, fearlessly climbing equipment designed for older children. "We're all better now, even Dad. Especially Dad." She leaned against my shoulder. "And you're better too. You don't look tired all the time anymore." Her perception touched me deeply. "Sometimes the hardest choices are the right ones," I said, putting my arm around her. "Even when they hurt at first. Like pulling off a Band-Aid really fast instead of slow," she offered. I laughed. "Something like that, yes." As I watched these children I loved so fiercely playing in the Arizona sunshine, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. By choosing myself that difficult night, I had ultimately chosen all of us, chosen health over dysfunction, sustainable love over self-sacrifice, boundaries over enabling. The path hadn't been easy or straight. There had been tears and doubts, setbacks, and difficult conversations. But sitting there, watching my family thrive in ways that would have been impossible without change, I knew with absolute certainty that walking away had been the most loving choice I could have made. For them, and finally, for myself. What difficult choices have you had to make for your own well-being? Have you ever had to set boundaries with loved ones to protect your health? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of strong women supporting each other, and share with someone who might need permission to put their own oxygen mask on first. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's often the most loving gift you can give to those who depend on you.